rain punished the city with an intensity that seemed to announce something great. The cobblestone streets reflected the flickering lights of the old lampposts, and the wind hissed through the narrow alleys. Vivianne Mercer pressed her shawl against her shoulders, feeling the cold cut through her skin as she hurried along the almost deserted boulevard. His mind was buzzing with confused memories, but it all dissolved the instant he heard a metallic crack behind him. She turned around with a start, and it was then that she saw him. A tall man, dressed in black, leaned against the wall of a gloomy building partially covered by shadows. Her damp hair clung to her forehead, and her eyes, of a shade impossible to describe, seemed to scan her with a disconcerting intensity. Nathaniel Hayes. Vivianne didn't know where she recognized that name from, but she felt as if she already knew it. A shiver ran down his spine as he stepped forward, allowing the light to reveal him better. The dark, elegantly cut suit bore marks of something she couldn't immediately pin down. Blood? Mud? The rain washed away the traces of his skin, but nothing could erase the gravity in his gaze. "Did you follow me?" His voice came out stronger than he expected. Nathaniel remained silent for a moment, his lips curving into an enigmatic half-smile. "It wasn't my intention," he replied, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "But it seems that our paths were destined to cross." Vivianne took a step back. Something inside her said that this man carried dangers that she should not face. But another impulse, stronger, more primal, prevented his legs from obeying the instinct to flee. "I don't believe in destiny." "Then maybe it's time to start believing." A rumble echoed in the distance, something between thunder and the dry noise of a shot drowned out by the storm. Nathaniel reacted first. In one swift motion, he grabbed Vivianne's arm and pulled her into a side alley. "What are you doing?" she protested, trying to let go. "If you want to live, be silent." Vivianne opened her mouth to retort, but the urgency in his voice made her heart beat faster. The smell of rain mingled with Nathaniel's subtle woody scent, and for a moment she was lost in the unexpected proximity. Then, hurried footsteps echoed down the empty street. Nathaniel pressed a finger against her lips, signaling her not to move. The tension in the air was palpable. Vivianne felt her chest rise and fall in a rapid breath, trying to understand what was happening. Who was behind them? When the footsteps finally parted, Nathaniel let out a long sigh, but he didn't loosen the grip on Vivianne's arm. "You need to trust me," he said, his voice low but charged with urgency. "There are things you don't understand." Vivianne narrowed her eyes. "And why should I trust a complete stranger?" His half-smile returned, but this time there was something almost sad about his expression. "Because, like it or not, you're already part of it." The thunder roared once more, and Vivianne knew that her life would never be the same. The silence between them was charged with tension. Vivianne could feel her heart pounding against her chest as she tried to assimilate Nathaniel's words. "You're already part of it." What did that mean? Who was he really? And why did he seem to know more about her than he should? The rain continued to fall, icy drips running down his face, and mingling with the whirlwind of thoughts. "I don't understand anything," she whispered, unable to hide the irritation in her voice. Nathaniel tilted his head slightly, analyzing it with that piercing gaze. "I don't expect you to understand now," he said, almost in a resigned tone. "But you need to trust me." Vivianne took a step back, crossing her arms in a gesture of self-defense. "You dragged me into an alley, act like my life is in danger, and then just ask me to trust you?" She snorted. "I'm sorry, but I'm not the kind of woman who takes orders from a mysterious stranger." Nathaniel sighed, running a hand through his wet hair. "I know it sounds crazy, but believe me, you don't want to be alone right now." The way he said those words made something inside her falter. There was a dark truth to his expression, something that sent a shiver through his skin. It was then that a high-pitched metallic sound broke the silence of the night. Vivianne didn't have time to react before Nathaniel pulled her again, this time gluing her against the cold wall of the alley. His arm was firmly against her waist, like protection. "Don't make any noise," he murmured against her ear. She felt her stomach turn at the closeness, but before she could say anything, she saw two figures emerge from the corner. Two men wearing dark coats, their faces partially obscured by fog and rain. One of them held something that Vivianne soon identified, a gun. His heart raced. "He can't have gone far," one of the men said, his voice deep and impatient. "We have to find him before it's too late," the other replied, looking around with sharp eyes. Vivianne held her breath, feeling Nathaniel tense next to her. She didn't know who these men were, but she knew that nothing good would come if they were discovered. The two strangers stood still for a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity, before finally moving on, disappearing into the mist of the street. Nathaniel waited until he was sure they were far away before loosening the grip around Vivianne. "Who were they?" she asked, trying to catch her breath. "Nathaniel Hesse. People who shouldn't be looking for you." Vivianne felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" Nathaniel ran his hand over his face as if considering what to say. "I promise I'll explain everything to you. But now we need to get out of here." Vivianne wanted to demand answers. She wanted to confront him and understand what this danger was that seemed to surround them. But something about his expression, a mixture of concern and urgency, held her back. She took a deep breath. "Where are we going?" Nathaniel looked around, making sure they were safe before reaching out to her. "To a place where they won't find you." Vivianne hesitated for a second, but then, against all her common sense, she held his hand. And at that moment I knew there was no turning back. The rain continued to fall as Nathaniel guided Vivianne through the dark streets. They passed through narrow alleys, crossed a little-traveled avenue, and finally came to an old building on the outskirts of the city. It looked like an abandoned warehouse with tall, rusty windows, but something about the way Nathaniel unlocked the door and pushed it inside indicated that this place was more than meets the eye. "Come in," he said, his voice low and cautious. Vivianne hesitated for a moment before walking through the door. The interior was spacious and surprisingly well organized. Metal bookshelves lined the walls filled with files and boxes. In the center of the room was a large wooden table covered with maps and scattered documents. A laptop flashed in the corner, indicating that someone used that space regularly. She turned to face him, her arms crossed. "Now, can you explain to me what's going on?" Nathaniel locked the door behind them and sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as if he was mustering up the courage to speak. "Vivianne, I know this all sounds crazy, but you need to understand that it was not by chance that those men were looking for you." Her heart raced. "What do you mean? I don't even know them." "Not yet," he corrected. "But you're part of it, whether you like it or not." She narrowed her eyes. "Of that, what?" Nathaniel took a deep breath before answering. "Of something much bigger than you think." Vivianne felt a shiver run down her spine. She wanted answers, but something told her she wouldn't like what she heard. "Then make me imagine," he challenged, trying to keep his voice steady. Nathaniel walked over to the table and picked up one of the files. He opened it, revealing a black and white photo of a man she had never seen before. "That's Alexander Holloway," he said. Vivianne analyzed the image. The man appeared to be about 50 years old, with intense eyes and a calculating look. There was something disturbing about that photo, something that made her stomach turn. "And who is he?" Nathaniel hesitated before answering. "Your father." Vivianne's world came to a standstill. She chuckled incredulously. "What? Is this some kind of joke? My father died when I was a child." Nathaniel closed the file and took her seriously. "No, Vivianne. He is alive, and he's the reason you're in danger." The air seemed to come out of his lungs. She stepped back a step, feeling her legs tremble. His mind struggled to process those words. "Was your father alive? The man your mother swore died years ago?" "You're lying," he whispered. Nathaniel shook his head. "I wanted to be, but I need you to listen to me." Vivianne felt her head spin. Nothing made sense. She looked around as if looking for something concrete to hold on to, but everything seemed far away. "Why now? Why me?" Nathaniel moved a little closer, his expression softening. "Because Alexander Holloway is back, and he wants to find you." The silence between them was overwhelming. Vivianne closed her eyes for a moment, trying to collect her thoughts. When she looked at him again, there was something new in her expression. "Then tell me the truth, Nathaniel. Who exactly are you?" Nathaniel held his gaze for a long moment before finally answering. "I'm the only person who can keep you alive." The silence that followed Nathaniel's words was dense, heavy, almost suffocating. Vivianne felt her heart beating so hard that it seemed to echo in her ears. His father was alive, and that mysterious man who had rescued her claimed to be the only person capable of keeping her alive. She took a step back, trying to take it all in. "This is crazy," he murmured, shaking his head. "You appear out of nowhere, drag me to this place and tell me that my father, who I spent my whole life believing to be dead, is alive and looking for me." Nathaniel kept his expression serious without looking away. "I understand how that sounds, but you need to trust me." She let out a bitter laugh. "Trust you? I don't even know who you are." Nathaniel took a deep breath and, after a moment's hesitation, pulled up a chair to sit down. He rested his elbows on the table and intertwined his fingers. "Right. So I'll tell you everything. But you need to promise that you will listen to me until the end." Vivianne crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "No promises. Just talk." Nathaniel nodded slowly, as if he was already expecting this answer. "Your father, Alexander Holloway, is no ordinary man. He's not just a businessman, an eccentric millionaire or anything like that. He is a brilliant strategist, someone who has built a network of information and influence that spans several countries. He was always one step ahead of any threat. Hitherto." Vivianne Franziu attesta. "Are you saying he's running away from someone?" "Exactly. And the worst thing is that we don't know exactly who is behind him. But we know that these same people want you." She swallowed. "And why?" Nathaniel Hesse. "Because you're the key." Vivianne felt an icy shiver run down her spine. "The key to what?" Nathaniel let out a heavy sigh before continuing. "Your father hid something very valuable. Something that could change the balance of power between some of the most dangerous organizations in the world. He disappeared to protect it. And you." She ran her hand through her hair, feeling her mind spin. "So you're telling me that my father, this man I never knew, suddenly decided to put me in the middle of a war I didn't even know existed?" Nathaniel tilted his head, analyzing it. "You've always been in the thick of it. I just didn't know." Vivianne felt the anger bubble up inside her. "That doesn't make sense. My mother never mentioned anything about it. My life has always been normal. It was normal because someone worked hard to keep it that way." She swallowed, feeling her stomach turn. "And what exactly do I have to do with it?" Nathaniel stood up and walked to one of the shelves. He took a small metal safe and placed it on the table. "Your father left you that. He wanted you to get it when you were ready." Vivianne stared at the safe, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "How do I know it's not a trap?" Nathaniel broke into a half-smile. "You don't know. But if you want answers, this is your chance." Her gaze fixed on the safe, doubt stamped on her face. She knew that from that moment on, there would be no turning back. The question was she ready for what she was going to discover? Vivianne hesitated in front of the safe. His heart hammered. What could be in there? Nathaniel pushed the box towards him. "If you want answers, open it." With trembling hands, she turned the latch. A dry click echoed through the room. Inside, there was an aged envelope and a golden key. She opened the letter and recognized the firm handwriting. "Vivianne, if you're reading this, it means that time has run out. You're the only one who can finish what I've started. This key will open the way. Trust only those who have proven their loyalty." Nathaniel watched in silence. "What does it mean?" she asked. "That your father entrusted you with something that many people would kill to have." Vivianne closed her eyes for a second. The weight of that revelation was overwhelming. "Where does this key take me?" Nathaniel folded his arms. "To the truth, but be prepared. Because after that, there is no turning back." She stared at the key in her palm, feeling the weight not only of the metal, but of the fate it carried. And then he decided he would go to the end. The golden key weighed heavily on Vivianne's hand. His heart was pounding. Nathaniel guided her through the dark corridors of the mansion to a hidden door behind a shelf of antique books. "Are you sure you want to do that?" he asked, his voice full of tension. Vivianne swallowed. There was no more room for doubt. He put the key in the lock. A crack rang out and the door slowly opened, revealing a narrow stone passageway. The air inside was dense, loaded with the smell of old paper and moisture. Candles attached to the walls lit the way, casting unsettling shadows. In the center of the subterranean room rested a chest of solid wood, ornamented with mysterious carvings. Vivianne knelt before him and opened the lid. His heart stopped for a moment. Inside the trunk there were yellowed documents, old photos, and a small leather notebook. She picked up the first leaf. It was a contract, and at the bottom of the page his father's signature. "What's that?" he whispered. Nathaniel approached, his eyes analyzing the document. When he read the first few lines, his face turned pale. "My God. Vivianne, your father was not who you thought." Her breathing quickened. "What does that mean?" Nathaniel took the notebook and opened it. The notes were meticulous, handwritten. Dates, names, locations. Vivianne ran her eyes through the pages and then found something that made her blood run cold. It was an old photograph. In it, a man held a baby. The man was his father. The baby, it wasn't her. She felt the ground disappear under her feet. Who is this child? Nathaniel closed his eyes for a moment. "The true heiress, Vivianne," she gasped, astonished. "What are you saying?" He stared at her, his gaze laden with truths that could no longer be hidden. "That maybe your whole life has been a lie." Vivianne feels the ground disappear under her feet. If the child in the photo was the true heiress, who was she? Nathaniel flips through the notebook, and each page reveals a darker secret. The name of the missing girl is there, Charlotte Davenport. Her father was involved in something much bigger than she could have imagined. Determined to uncover the truth, Vivianne rummages through the documents and discovers that Charlotte mysteriously disappeared years ago. His father's name appears in several suspicious transactions, as if he had assumed an identity that did not belong to him. The question that torments her now is, why? Before they can process all the discoveries, noises in the mansion indicate that they are not alone. Someone was watching them. Nathaniel quickly blows out the candles and whispers to Vivianne to run. They escape through a side corridor, but are pursued by mysterious men. The trunk and notebook are left behind. Now Vivianne and Nathaniel not only need the answers, but they also need to survive. During the escape, Vivianne receives an anonymous call. A distorted voice says only one sentence. "You should never have opened that door." After a series of clues and desperate escapes, Vivianne discovers that there is a living woman who can clarify everything. Evelyn Prescott, a former maid of the mansion who disappeared decades ago. They find her in a remote psychiatric hospital. Evelyn reveals the truth. Charlotte Davenport was kidnapped as a baby and replaced by another child, Vivianne. Her father raised her as a legitimate daughter to cover up something much bigger, a scam to steal the Davenport family inheritance. Vivianne feels her world fall apart. Their identity, their origin, it was all a lie. Before they can decide what to do with the truth, the mansion where it all began mysteriously catches fire. The past is being erased. Vivianne receives an envelope left anonymously at the reception of the hotel where she is hiding. Inside, a single photo. She and Charlotte, still babies, side by side. On the back, a handwritten message. "Look no further. Some truths must remain buried." But Vivianne didn't give up. The story is not over yet. Vivianne stares at the photo for long minutes. Look no further. But giving up was never an option. Nathaniel discovers that the fire in the mansion was criminal. Someone is erasing evidence. "We need to get out of here," he warns. But Vivianne makes a decision. She sets up a meeting with the person who warned her. In the cemetery at dawn, a hooded figure awaits her. "You've always been smart, but not enough." The gun rises. The trigger click echoes. Before firing, another shot cuts through the air. The figure falls. Evelyn Prescott lowers the gun. "I owed you that." Vivianne takes a deep breath. It was all a game of lies. And now, finally, she won. The sun gilded the sky as Vivianne and Nathaniel entered the restored mansion. After months of investigation and dangers, finally the truth was before her. The inheritance that had been hidden, the secrets that almost destroyed her. Everything was revealed in that last clue, an old will kept in the Prescott family's safe. Vivianne read the words in shock. She was the rightful heir to an incalculable fortune. The wealth she thought had been torn from her life had never been lost, only hidden until she was ready to receive it. She looked at Nathaniel, who was watching her with a soft smile. "You've always been a millionaire, Vivianne," he said, holding her hands. "I just needed to figure it out myself." Tears of emotion rolled down her face. Everything that is past, all the battles culminated in that moment. Days later, under the property's starry sky, Vivianne and Nathaniel exchanged vows in a low-key ceremony, surrounded only by those who truly mattered. When Nathaniel kissed her, she felt not only love, but a deep certainty. Her story was not one of loss, but of reunions. And finally, she was exactly where she always belonged,